Welcome in, and thanks so much for joining me. A big welcome to those of you who are newer to my channel, as well as to those of you who come often. Thank you so much for regularly listening and connecting to the content I offer on YouTube and my podcast, the Buddhist Wisdom Podcast. For those of you who are newer, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Scott Tusa. I am a Dharma practitioner, meditation teacher, and I also mentor people in their meditation practice. And I started my podcast as well as this YouTube channel in order to share practical Dharma and Buddhist teachings, as well as tips and tricks for meditation for modern practitioners, for those of us who are born in the West, the Western part of the world, and may be newer to the cultural forms of Buddhism that exist. I generally teach from the Himalayan or Tibetan Buddhist traditions, so that's the kind of flavor you'll see here. But as always, I really aim to offer a bridge into its practices and deepening our Dharma practice. So with that out of the way, welcome. And today I'd like to discuss how to kind of conserve energy is really the topic. And this is something that obviously it applies to Buddhist practice and meditation in general, but I think it just applies to life. It applies to how we work with our emotions, how we work with our relationships and conversations with others, as well as how we spend our time. And so I've been sort of thinking a lot about, as I get older, not only how to conserve energy, but where I can sort of cut away stress that doesn't need to be there. Obviously, some parts of life are just inherently stressful, and they're going to be, and we have to learn to navigate them. I have a lot of content on that from a Buddhist perspective of how to transform our stress and suffering, how to work with it, how to understand it, and actually use it on our spiritual path. But also, I've noticed in my life, there's a lot of stress that is very much self-created and unavoidable. Right? And so one of my teachers, Soni Rinpoche, among a lot of precious advice I've received from him, there's one piece of advice that really stuck with me. Initially, when he told me it, I was slightly confused. I knew what he meant intuitively, but I didn't know how to bring that about in my life. And so it took some years to reflect on it, see, how I can actually understand that particular teaching and how it applies to conserving energy and not wasting effort or giving up my agency. And it's a simple phrase. He basically said, drop the caring and let the true caring come. Some of you might be able to find this in his public teachings as well. I know he said it publicly too. So drop the caring and let the true caring come. Already there's a question. There's something we can be curious about. What's the difference between caring and true caring? And why would we want to drop a certain kind of caring, right? And how do we adopt true caring? So, over the years, as I've heard him explain this, as well as I've explored it myself, what he means by drop the caring generally, and what this phrase is referring to, is the kind of neurotic caring where we think it takes the energy of concern or worry or fear, anxiety about something, and that's how we serve it. That's how we care for it. Maybe for some of us, that's how we get things done, right? But as many of us can see, when we're in sort of anxiety mode about something, it usually does the opposite. For me, it can put me into moments of kind of freezing, procrastination. I guess I could say like overcare when something requires a certain amount of, let's say, poise and calm to do it. But if I'm overcaring, I'm anxious and clumsy sometimes, as well as some things that just actually don't require me to care about. I know that sounds harsh, but I'm kind of talking about small things here, not like large world issues or someone else. I'm really talking about like, let's say I spill some water on the floor, that's really the category I'm referring to, where, most people, I think, that's not a big deal. You just figure out how to clean it up. But when we're in an anxious mode, when we're in a stress mode, it sort of takes on a life of its own, and it can seem like a small mountain, to fix. And I know that it's silly to say about just spilling a cup of water, but watch the body, watch the nervous system. This is a big clue of how we are caring in the first type of caring, the neurotic or anxious caring. The nervous system will be more activated than it needs to be for a cup of water or something similar. It's just an example. And we're going to be stressed about something that all it requires is getting a towel and wiping it up, right? So anyways, this is just like one small example, but this does obviously apply to lots of different kinds of life experiences, relationships, and issues. So this is kind of the first area I work with personally in understanding where I'm not quite wasting, but maybe let's say losing energy, like losing vitality, losing energy through anxiousness and worry about something that doesn't require that, or something that I don't really need to be worried about, right? And again, there's going to be different layers to this for all of us. So I'm not here to say what that looks like for you. I'm just here to offer some reflection or contemplation on noticing the activated nervous system, noticing when we are in that anxious mode. And then the question comes, does this require that? I found that to be the first step for me. Does this particular issue or problem require me to be anxious or stressed about it? Now, that doesn't really solve it most of the time, because the stress is in the body and we need to attend to it in the body and in the nervous system. But the question is the first step. It gets us out of the thought rumination mode that we may be stuck in around the problem we're perceiving, right? And dropping the caring for me isn't simply a conceptual process. The question, the concept is the first step of, do I need to be activated about this right now? And if the answer is no, then I tend to connect with the feeling, provide some kind of compassionate presence through mindful awareness, just feeling the feeling. And, there's a lot of content I have on these kinds of practices. Sonny Rinpoche himself teaches, is where I get, my practice from on this. He teaches a practice called the handshake practice, which is vital to me and many I work with. And it's a practice basically of meeting our experience as it is in the feeling world, not thinking about it, not ruminating, not trying to fix or change it, but just learning to meet it as a feeling with awareness. And we're not trying to get rid of it. We're just trying to essentially feel and be compassionate towards it. And the compassion is the willingness to meet it. The compassion is the non-judgment. The compassion is, not immediately trying to fix it or outthink it or all of that. So anyways, I don't want to go too much into it here, but there's lots of content I have on that practice, as well as guided meditations on my website. And I highly recommend Sonny Rinpoche. He's the source of it. So you can go to Fully Being, his course, where he teaches extensively on how to work with that. But either way, for me, it's that process of curiosity. First, the question, am I over-caring in this particular situation with the cup of water? Okay, if so, meet the overcare, meet the anxiousness, meet the stress in the body, allow it to naturally unwind and settle on its own. I don't have to do anything, right? Now, of course, for me, this is a little easier at this point because it's been many years of doing somatic awareness practices or embodied awareness practices. And so it's a little quicker for the settling to happen for me, but not all the time. Sometimes things don't settle for me, and that's okay too. But either way, that's one way to think of what the caring looks like. We first have to identify it, and then we can start to drop it. Drop it means we're not fighting it. We're not pushing it away. It means being compassionate towards it so it can release on its own. That's really what drop means. Now, true caring, right? So we have drop the caring and let the true caring come. The true caring is compassion. It's compassion which is willing to meet the messiness of life. It's compassion that's willing to meet the imperfection of life, right? And it's the knowledge that it's not perfect and it probably won't ever be perfect. And that true caring is in the moment. It's present with the pain, whether it's, our own stress, anxiety, and pain, or that of another person. It's present. It's open. It's not trying to fix it right away, right? It's trying to allow some space to connect with it as it is. So just as we develop a relationship to letting be or dropping the neurotic caring, we develop a relationship to connecting with true caring. So in general, and as I said, one way to think of this simply is just to work with one of the practices Sonny Rinpoche recommends, that he teaches, called the handshake practice, as I mentioned already. There's many other methods, but that's a wonderful one that's helped me a lot. So that's the general idea of what I tend to do when I'm working with this practice of not losing energy where it doesn't need to be lost, right? I think our energy is best spent on serving others, right? As Buddhist practitioners, that service comes directly in our relationships in any kind of work we do in the world, but it also comes through on our cushion. It actually comes through the practice we do with our own mind on our own side of the street, because that's also how we unfold and transform ourselves to benefit others more in the world. So ultimately, we're trying to recognize where we can free up energy so that we can turn it back around and dedicate it towards our transformative spiritual practice, the Buddha Dharma, our meditation practice, however we look at it, however we want to do our personal work, our personal spiritual work. So that's basically what I wanted to say, but just some reflections, some takeaways. I think these questions, these contemplations of where we could be losing and or wasting our energy are good ones. And, as long as we don't turn it into a weapon against ourselves or judgment against ourselves, it's just a recognition of, our own confusion, which actually deserves compassion, right? So for me, there's a lot of confusion I deal with on a daily basis. And a lot of that confusion does get me caught up in overreaction or personalizing an emotional reaction that I'm having, personalizing someone else's, reaction to me or a situation I'm in with someone else. And the whole idea here is to be able to take a broader view. And so that first step of actually asking questions, of being curious, it's not the easiest one, because although it's kind of conceptual, so it's easy for those of us who tend to use thinking as our primary way of understanding ourselves, it's easier in that way, but it's difficult because we're going to see things we don't like. And that's where I suggest just taking it easy, being really gentle with yourself. We're seeing things we don't like so we can change them, right? We're rooting out where we are wasting or losing energy so we can stop doing that, right? So we do have to remember the purpose or the reason we're doing it in the first place. This helps me a lot, because once we start to see, wow, there's a lot of places where I'm overcaring and or moving into anxiety, and we start to ask, is that necessary? And we want to change that because we see it's changeable, right? That's the good news. We never want to see, I don't think it's really worth it to see something that's not changeable. I mean, we can see it and we can acknowledge it, and we can acknowledge maybe it can't be changed. That's fine. But, there's not much more to do after that. But for something that is transformable, that we can change, it's really healthy to want to see it. And as Dharma practitioners, this is kind of one of the main things we do. We're looking at mind, we're working with mind, body, and emotions and heart, and we're trying to understand where we're stuck. We're trying to understand where dissatisfaction comes from, what's the root, and how can we transform that. And as we practice, we really start to see it's mostly an inside job. I'm not saying completely, but it's mostly an inside job. And once we have that recognition and conviction, then it's just the process of gaining strength to be able to look at where things are going askew or off. So yeah, as I said, this has been incredibly helpful for me, especially lately, of just sort of seeing, okay, I don't need to go there. I don't need to spend my energy getting preoccupied with that particular emotional experience. And I'm not saying I can do that at will all the time. I get overwhelmed as well. But more and more my meditation practice helps me to do this. And, depending on what it is. And I got to say, that's something I think really valuable. This is one of the reasons I really could say, like, when some people ask me, what have you gotten out of meditation over the years you've done it? That the ability to work with emotions in a more skillful way, and now to sort of have some decision making. Okay, do I want to launch into that particular reaction? Is that going to serve the energy of compassion for myself and others, or not? Is it going to take away from that? So I think a lot of what meditation and Dharma practice can bring is choice, is some discernment and wisdom and compassion. And I'm very much a beginner in that, so I'm still growing it. But just even the potential to see that's possible to grow is pretty big, and that inspires me every day to show up to my meditation. So this isn't an episode about how to sustain a consistent meditation practice. I've offered a few of those, so you can go search for. But hey, let's throw it in the bucket. That's another reason. We can say, basically, if we can have more freedom and flexibility and an ability to choose how we want to respond, that's a big plus, right? That's a huge plus. So I hope this is helpful. As always, please let me know. Reach out in the comments if you want to. It helps me to understand what kind of content is helpful to you who are listening to this regularly. And wishing you all the best and using your energy well. Thanks so much.